represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, I'm very pleased to have a highly unusual guest from a very unusual location. He comes from a very proud geographical location. He's sitting on an unceded land of the Mi'kmaq people. Cape Breton Island is the birthplace of commerce and mercantile trade in North America. Louisburg was the first fortified stronghold in the entrance to all of North America. The French and the English battled for this strategic maritime location. He has been living through the globalization of this small island and wants to share with you what has been taking place. Glenn Muse by name, I'm so pleased to have you as my featured guest today. Join the conversation.
Thank you very much, Jim, for having me. I'm sitting on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation in Canada. We are the only nation in North America that did not bend the knee to the king. We only pledged allegiance to the Pope at the time and called him uncle. So Grand Chief Membertou was responsible for keeping an eye on the activities of the church in Cape Breton and did a fantastic job, as we never went through the tyranny that everybody else incurred. My name is Glenn Muse. I'm a proud descendant of Irish, French, and Mi'kmaq. That makes me an Acadian. 250 years ago, there was a genocide in the maritime provinces of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, and Prince Edward Island. If you want to take a shot and take a look on the map, look for Maritime Canada, and have a look at what I'm going to tell you. Cape Breton Island, Isle Madame was a French, Portuguese, English settlement. John Cabot came here and found codfish that were the size of a 6-foot human. And they began the first trade from North America to the British colonies in Europe of the cod. The cod was salted and it was shipped back in the hulls of these ships. The Portuguese came, they set up colonies in Newfoundland and Cape Breton. And at that time, over in France, during the early 1600s, the Huguenots were purging the Catholics. And my descendants, my great-great-grandfather, grandpère, his name was Philippe Muse d'Entremont. Now, d'Entremont was the name of the individual in France who granted title to Philippe Muse to come to Nova Scotia in 1655. He came here, 1616. He came here and he married a woman of the Mi'kmaq Nation. Her name was Marie Baptiste. And from there were 16 sons. These 16 sons grew to be healthy men. And all of them were trained in the ways of the Acadian people, which became a distinct generational culture and ruled the maritime provinces up to 1755. Now, there were major things that were taking place here. Louisburg, as mentioned, Louisburg was a very fortified place. And in order to get to Louisburg, you have to look at the shipping patterns of the day. When you launched the vessel from Europe and you caught the trade winds and you caught the Gulf Stream, naturally it would take you right in to the Louisburg. It would, if you set your boat up in England and Spain and you come riding in, it was a normal place to land. And it was deemed the hub of everything that was going on for the French and the English at the time. Now we were accustomed to living with the Mi'kmaq, so we learned everything from the Mi'kmaq. So the Acadians thrived, but the genocide was committed against us, and we were shipped all over the world to Haiti. But the majority of my people were shipped to Louisiana. They were shipped down into because they were famous for their works with dikes, and they were famous for their works in that area. They were sent down to Louisiana. They thought that the alligators might eat them, but you know what? We ate the alligators, and we came back here, and we set up shop again, and we had alligator boots though. And when we got back here, and so all of my family was dispersed around the small island of Cape Breton. Now, Cape Breton Island is so unique in what I'm going to build up to with the globalization that you have to understand its position in history. Now, when they set up shop here, the English and the French, they kept on beating each other up all the time, and they were mostly beating each other up. So my people were just sitting back watching, and we headed to places that the British couldn't get to. On the island, there's a northern tip you'll see on the northwestern top of Cape Breton. There is a natural occurring wind there we call that at least a wet wind. You cannot land a big vessel with sails on it anywhere in there. The only way to get in there is on a small 2-sail punt with a double keel that we invented. And we were able to hide on a plateau there. Thousands of people were hidden in the Margaree Valley, and we were hidden in the plateau. And so we thrived. And the Scots came along and set up shore down below, just on the other side of the valley. And between the Scots and the Acadians, we developed our own type of industries there, and coal mining was one of them. And so the Baron came over from England, and he noticed there was a lot of coal here. So they sent over the British Empire and Steel Corporation to take a look at what was going on in Cape Breton, and they laid claim to everything that was Irish or French. And the British laid claim to it, and they destroyed Louisburg, and they came in with their big ships and their guns, and they came in with their big armies, and they tracked down the Acadians and the Mi'kmaq. But they had a flaw. See, they could not leave their fortified places without having like 20 or 30 men. Then they had to have wagons and horses to carry their stuff. And they always left in platoons like that. And they were easy pickings for my people. So we started, and you're going to be shocked. American people, listen up. It was the Acadian people who first scalped the first British soldier. That scalp was taken and hung up on a stick and put on a horse and sent into the fortress where General Cornwallis was held up. And he was terrified of us. And we started stringing up these redcoats all up and down the coast. Okay, these people were terrified of what was happening. And now we come to the point where Cornwallis decided, well, rather than start beating these people up all the time, maybe we'll give them back a few pieces of land and we'll leave them alone again, and which he did, because they had a ceremony, and they're going to like this, because it's in our language. It's in the lexicon. It's called burying the hatchet. It happened in 1769 outside of Halifax on the plains where my people said, if you don't come out here and meet us on our territory and do this symbolic gesture of burying the hatchet, then we're not going to play games. But he did come out. Cornwallis came out. They had the ceremony. There was the Treaty of 1759, which became instrumental in things to come in the future. So now we're up to the point where the British had decided that, okay, they're going to colonize more, and they're going to develop the steel and coal industries. So we're going to jump into the 1800s. They started off in my neck of the woods in a place called Low Point, which is in Cape Breton. And it's the lowest point, I guess, in the harbor of Sydney. The harbor of Sydney was used to stage all of the convoys for the First World Wars. Anyway, this harbor on the Low Point, my grandfather, Joe Ling from Ireland, he came from the potato famine in the late 1800s, and he set up on Low Point, where he became the patron of the area. And he was nobody to mess around with. He was 6'4", weighed about 250, and everybody talked to Joe, and Joe knew what to do. He was an Irishman. He didn't put up with no BS. Anyway, he ran that operation. Then on the other side of the island was my other grandfather. His name was Angus Muse, and he had two brothers, Jim and Sandy. Now these three characters, I'll call them characters because I'm like them. This was in the early 1900s, before theaters, and they had the three of them traveled around the coal mining towns here, and there were a lot of them. We had at the time 18 mines running, and we had 2 steel mills going. Everything was starting to really boom, and these guys came in from the country, and they had a minstrel show, and they used to go around town to town, the three of them, and they would do these minstrel shows in blackface. And at the time, it was an acceptable practice. And so around they go doing these things. So we had my grandfather Angus on that side, my grandfather Joe on the other side. Now, Angus was an Acadian, and he didn't like the English one little bit. And Joe was the same. He was Irish. He didn't like the English one little bit. And the two of them, they never ever met. But what they did is instrumental in what happened to me. Angus, my grandfather, they were coal miners. Now, they were short men. They were about 5'7", 5'6". They were a good build. And coal mining in Cape Breton, when you were at the wall face, you needed small, strong men. You didn't need big guys in there. You needed the right temperament. And these guys were good at what they did. They would go in and cut the stone and chop it out to get at the coal. And it was a big job. And they called that brushing. And so Angus and his brothers were good at what they did. Now, the First World War broke out, and they started to enlist the Canadian soldiers to fight with the Canadian regiment in the First World War. My grandfather Angus and his two brothers refused to work for the king. They refused. They said, we'll work in the pit, but we're not going to go over and kill no Germans that are just like us and probably mining coal like us. And we want to go over there and kill them? No, I don't think so. So he refused to go until the whole Newfoundland regiment was wiped out at Beaumont Hamel in the First World War. There were hundreds and hundreds of men. Some of them were relatives of my grandfather. So there was a request that came about May of 1917 from General Curry. He was in front of what they called Hill 61. General Curry took over for the first time ever a fighting force that had a Canadian general at the lead. And he was in charge of the Aztecs. He was in charge of the Australians and the New Zealanders, as well as the Canadians and the Fijians. And so General Curry knew that the British, for over a year and a half, had tried to take out Hill 61. They tried everything. They wore out all their tunnelers. They burnt out the Samoans. They burnt out the Fijians. They burned them all out. They had no tunnelers left. And they had this tunnel boring machine that came from Scotland that only went 3 feet. It bogged down, and they couldn't get underneath Hill 61. If they didn't blow it up, they weren't getting down the line to Antwerp. So General Curry made a request, and 32 miners from Cape Breton were sent over to Halifax and then shipped right over to France. They even had a small railroad trolley that was 3 feet in diameter across, and that was a small trolley that went over the mud and took them directly from where they came so they could get in and out without trouble because they were special. These coal miners went in, and underneath Hill 61, led by my grandfather and his compatriots, and they actually talked to the other miners from the other side, tapping, telling them when to get out. And they got in trouble for it. But that was all right. They did their job. They dug out the rooms underneath Hill 61. And below the rooms that they dug out, they dug another set of tunnels that came up underneath Hill 61 and up the other side so that Canadian troops could go in those tunnels when they blew it, and they'd be already positioned on the other side to face what would be running down. So it was a remarkable strategy that they deployed and did it in 3 months. And I was told that they ran into chalk. Into a coal miner, chalk is like having butter. That's like cutting butter. So they were like being artistic. And there's still tunnels over there where you'll find the chalk in names and stuff. So they blew that Hill 61. Angus and the boys were sent right back to Canada, only to land in Halifax in the greatest explosion that ever hit Nova Scotia or the Eastern Seaboard, the Halifax explosion where the 2 ammunition ships exploded in the harbor. Well. So Cape Breton at the time, that was part of my grandfather on that side, and it's part of my heritage. We're going to move up the line again so you can understand where I'm fitting into this now. In 1980, I'm going to start here because in 1980, I joined the workforce. So I didn't want to be a coal miner. Submarine coal mining is a very dangerous job. You're going 2 miles under the Atlantic Ocean. Okay? You're going down by cable. And my job was to take people down in the little boxcars down into the coal mine on the end of a cable that went 2.1 kilometers. And then I had to take it all the way back up. There were tons and tons of equipment on little boxes. So coal mining was a dangerous job. We were hired young men, and the 26 guys that were hired at the same time, we were hired at a time when the United Mine Workers of America were in charge of our unions. And when we got hired, we wanted to know why that was. Well, why was the UNWA running the affairs of Canadian coal miners in Cape Breton? And so we had a strike for the first time in 40 years. And we expected to have a lot of strike funds. And of course, the UNWA said, no, you don't have any. So we had to fight a strike without the help of the International Union in Washington. And when we did that, we won it actually, we held out, but with no help from them. So I became disenchanted with the union. So did my fellow workers that were around me. And I, at the time, was drinking, and I'm sober 39 years the other day. But then I was drinking. And as a drinking, coal mining, fisticuffing, womanizing, you name it, you're a coal miner and you're living in a little town in Cape Breton. I'm telling you, they'd rather fight than eat. We had bars everywhere, like taverns and that, but they never had a union hall. And I couldn't figure that out. I said, how do we voice our, like our opinions or our questions? And so I was told that they had one meeting every 2 weeks, and that people would just go there, and it was controlled by rowdies, and shout them down, and nothing got done. And so we decided, hey, we're going to take them on. So my buddy Archie Kennedy made a phone call, and we got an organizer in to help us, and we raided the United Mine Workers of America, and we took on the biggest, ugliest, corrupt union in the world, and we did it. We had to sign up every coal miner with a card, and he had to give us $5, and that was like pulling teeth. Okay, like you gotta get $5 and sign a card. Sign the card's good enough. We got to pay $5. Now they put that in there, but we did it, and we got to the vote. And of course, we thought we were going to win, but Labor Canada and the UNW, we were naive. We didn't know what we were up on. I was just getting introduced to what I was going to face. This was the beast. So we said, we're going to do this again. So we did a second raid. This time I was sober. And I was sober, and I was conscious, and the cloud that lifted, and my friends around me and everybody, we were right into it. And I became the biggest threat to the UNW of A, Richard Trumka and his goons made a special visit to Cape Breton to meet me. Well, that was that was an interesting meeting. Richard Trumka landed at the Sydney airport in a private jet, and this was 1982. And in 1982, you arrive at a private jet at Cape Breton Sydney Airport, then everybody knows, because we don't usually get private jets, right? And so my uncle George, God, there are uncles and cousins everywhere. He calls up and says, they're in town, Glenn. I said, what are you talking about? So I knew that the next morning at the pithead where I would be handing out my leaflets, we had a Gestetner, that's all we had. And I'd be handing out our leaflets. And this, I had a friend of mine, his name was George Fraser, and he was Man Mountain Mike. If you want to think about, you know, who's that, John Henry? Anyway, he was big, but he had a list. But you didn't mess with George. He had the list. He'd crush you. You ever made fun of him. But he was my bodyguard. And he was standing behind me when they get out of the limo. Richard Trumka came walking right up to me. And he put his hand out. When he put his hand out, I spit on his hand. Oh my Lord God Almighty. You thought the two goons went for their jackets, and George grabbed one guy, threw him right over the top of me, and then had the other guy by the throat with just like that. And Trumka, they ran back into the car and they took off. We never seen them again. But they sent in their hitman, they seized the district, they took the books, they canceled all the autonomy of all of the locals. They basically took over. And at that time, I withdrew my my services from the coal mine, and I went to university. I said, I'm out of here, because when I woke up after being drunk for years, I decided I was going to learn. Now, can you see my forehead?
Yes. Not the audience, the radio audience, but I can certainly see it, Glenn.
Okay, Jim, what you're looking at is a total frontal lobe impairment when I was 15 years old. Okay? I was working on a summer job, and I got hit with a mile hammer when I was 15 years old. And guess what had happened? It happened on the day that they said that Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. I got hit in the head working on this fence. I was dead. And they took me to the hospital. And when I got to the hospital, my mother was the emergency room supervisor in a brand new hospital that had just been built in New Waterford, where I live, by the coal miners, with a brand new operating room. And here I am dead in front of her. She brings me back to life, which is miraculous. At the same time, I was told, because I was out, that there were individuals in the emergency room that shouldn't have been there. Nobody knew who they were, but they disappeared. Dr. Naqvi from India, a neurosurgeon who was right out of McGill University, was doing his first week of residency here. What are the chances that he would be there to put me in the first induced coma that he ever did? Removed the bone fragments, kept me in a coma to put a silver plate in. They told my parents that if I did come out of it, I'd probably be an idiot, like a drooler. And so everybody was preparing for the worst, and I'm out like a light. My buddy Eddie was the only one. He used to come up, sit down with the chessboard while I was out, and he played chess. He'd say the moves. He did that daily. And then he read to me the entire first book of Dune by Frank Herbert while I was out.
Glenn, this may be this may be the right point to take a break. We're about to hit, and I'm just
Okay.
fascinated by the history you're sharing here. It's really quite extraordinary. We will be taking calls at the bottom of the second hour, which will begin right after this break. Delighted to have Glenn Muse here from an exotic part of the world with an extraordinary history he is recounting for us here and now. So stand by. We'll be right back. I'm simply delighted to have an exotic part of the world that's played an important but largely unknown role in our history, aspects of which, such as burying the hatchet, the first scalp taken in North America, are extraordinary beyond belief. Glenn, please continue with your story. Bring us up to the current effort of the globalists to seize control of your area of the world and its consequences and ramifications.
Right on, Jim. I'll end with where I started just in before the last half hour by saying that an important part of my journey is the head injury, my revival, and subsequent a trip up into 1988. Okay, because I didn't realize that when I was brought back to life after the head injury, that I was given an angel that accompanied me. And I didn't realize that until later in life. We'll get to that another time. We're going to go right now to 1988. I had formed a company, and I had training on computers. I had the first clone 286s megahertz computers on the island. So I was a novelty. So I got this company and I got it going, and I trained a whole pile of people. And then I realized the money I was making, a pile of money, and I didn't want it because I didn't like, I wanted it, but I didn't want it. It became a burden, and I got hooked up with a Jezebel, and I dropped everything and walked away. I gave the keys to the 5 guys I trained, and I said, I had enough of this. I'm done. I can't be a cutthroat. I just can't do it. And I ended up walking away from a woman who turned out to be a Jehovah's Witness that had her hooks in me. So I had to get rid of that. So once that was out of the way, I went into a retreat. And in 1990, I was listening on the radio at night, and I was getting all this chatter at night that was coming in from George Norrie and from Art Bell and from different places around North America. And in 1992, I received a letter from a friend of mine. And in the letter, he stated that there was a meeting in Brazil, and that the Agenda 2021, 2030, or 2021 at the time was being proposed. And he gave me the outline of what they were going to do. And I was shocked because I had become educated. I'd gone to university. I'd taken 4 years in a core BA core liberal arts program, which was we had Dominican priests. We had a spy there, Marcel Lenoir, he was teaching. We had a woman from Azerbaijan. She was teaching about the fall of the wall. We had all kinds. I was trained up the yin yang, and I was anxious. So I decided I was going to find more out about this Agenda 21. Now, Cape Breton Island is so strategic, and I'll tell you why. Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone here in Bedeck, Nova Scotia, where he's buried. Guido Marconi, under Bell's tutelage, also invented the radio here and broadcast from Table Head. Down the street from where I'm sitting, there is a beautiful little company house where a guy named Art McDonald grew up. Now, you might recognize the name, but if I told you that his name was Dr. Arthur B. McDonald, and that he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2005 for discovering the neutrinos. So he's responsible for CERN. Think about that. He just lived down the street. So I'm on Cape Breton, and all this is going on. And there's other things that are important about Cape Breton. Okay? To the globalists, this was the place that they wanted to show how you could deindustrialize, dehumanize, and depatriotize a citizenry and do it while I slept. And it happened. I tried to stop it. 1994, I had got involved with some people here, and they were really concerned, and so was I. So I come up with a plan. I created a character, and part of it is with the hat you see, Jim. You might want to describe the fedora. It has a little fish hook here for fly fishing, but with the fedora, and my hair was a little longer, and I had an earring, and at the time before the trench coat mafia, mind you, I had a trench coat of kangaroo hide, and I looked like a renegade, and I threw my hat into the ring for mayor of what they call the regional municipality of Cape Breton. So here we have 6 small towns of about 10,000 people in each small town. And every one of them are connected by the coal mines and the steel industry. Now, each one of these small towns have their own councils and their own bylaws. And there are counties that are federal that link in between there. But these small towns, at the time, didn't want to join into this regionalization they were proposing. And I was trying to warn them. So I got involved in the election. I got on the ballot. Now, I started an on-the-ground campaign like nobody ever did before because we had no internet. Now, I'm on a small island of 85,000 people. The ones that are concerned about voting are the only ones that are 45,000. So that 45,000 people I had to get to are all listening to one radio show every morning at 10 a.m. It's called Talkback. And it reaches everybody and people call in, Talkback. So I domineered that show. Really. And I took it over basically, and I got beeped out more times than anybody. And the guy that ran it was a little egomaniac that ended up getting convicted and put in jail years later, but that's another story. But he was trying to downplay me, and he was working with the globalists to keep me off the ballot, get rid of me. So the people that were against me, we have in Nova Scotia what they call Section 228, one of their communist property protection laws. And if I write a letter up and I say I hand it to you and it says you are not permitted to step onto my property or you'll be charged. So these letters started being handed to me all over the place. At the end of it, I wasn't even allowed to walk on the sidewalk. I was banned from the coffee shops, banned from the malls. The firemen were backing me, the police were backing me. Everybody was backing me in the little towns, and I was starting to move up. I was 2 weeks into it with 2 weeks to go. And I stepped out of the boundaries of the small town called New Waterford into the county, which would be the same as if like you went into the town jurisdiction and you went into where a sheriff was. Well, the federal government, the RCMP, they were policing the county areas. So when I left the jurisdiction of the local police, they picked me up. I was taken to jail, held incognito, given one interview with a legal aid lawyer where I wrote a statement that he read at the debate that I wasn't allowed to go to. I proposed to go in shackles, but they wouldn't take me. I was kept incognito in a holding cell for the duration of the election. They managed to stack the ballot with 4 more liberals. So they had 6 people on the ballot. I was in jail, polling at 70% on the ballot. What are they going to do if I win? Nobody in Canada has ever run for elected office from a jail cell, ever. The last guy to do that was Louis Riel, and they hung him. And, excuse me, let's get a drink here. So I'm in the jail, and the guards are behind me. They let me out of so I can wander freely in the jail anywhere I want to go. Everybody in the jail, all the locals, they love me. I'm there doing bottle totes of hashish in the cell, watching the returns on the TV, and they're making fun of me on the TV. And there's the polls going up. I'm up to 2,200 votes when they stop broadcasting on the local cable. And needless to say, they stacked the ballot and they declared John Cody the winner. And they never released the total ballots until a couple of days later. But I beat out the hand-picked liberal from a jail cell. They couldn't get rid of that because it was too overwhelming. So they had to put that in, but they spent $500,000 trying to keep me out of the mayor's chair. And they did it successfully. And then I was labeled, and then I was pushed into a position where I had to put myself in exile to Halifax, 500 kilometers away, because it became unbearable here. And my family, they were shitting all over them, so I had to get out of here. So we got to move along and up to, they started with their program. Here's what they do. First, they take over the local councils and the school boards, and they regionalize everything. They regionalize the school boards. They regionalize the hospitals. They regionalize all of the townships and counties. Everybody reports to one central authority. There's no way to communicate with any of these government agencies for the simple fact that the boards are taken away. So there's no way to get to them except through written communication. They have complete total control over the media. There is nobody here on this island can make a statement about what's happening in the government, because the regionalization process has gotten to the point where we lost all of our coal mines are gone. All of the railroad is gone. They've taken out all of the steel plant was sold to China. Everything that was here that was industrial has disappeared. We are now have only a sentient population of pensioners and service industries that are basically paid for by the government. Everything is communist. You work for the hospital, you work for the school board, you work for industries that are reliant on the government, you work in and all of it, social service, all of it. There are some small enterprises, but they're all linked together in this enterprise network. So they're not really, this is, the word I'm looking for, Jim, is commutarianism. It's a blending. That's communism with economics to the left, not to the fascist, neo-fascist side. We're talking more to the middle neoliberal commutarianism, and it's being taught at Harvard by the Zionists. And so this is what's encapsulated Cape Breton. And now we get to the big part. Right to the north of Cape Breton is Newfoundland. And Newfoundland is another province that only joined in 1949, similar to Alaska, right? And Newfoundland joined Canada, and but it was an independent state, basically, before World War II. When World War II occurred, the Americans came in to Stephenville, Newfoundland, and they set up the biggest naval base, airfield, and underground tunnel networks in all of North America, and they're still there. Okay, you could park a sub in the harbor and go right in. You think about Antarctica, and they got all that crap going on down there. Well, you think about Stephenville, Newfoundland. Now, the air base can hold, and it was the biggest air base before the Second World War. All of your transports, all of your stuff that went to the World War effort flew through Stephenville. Okay, now, 8 weeks ago, a Chinese Jewish company called Diamond bought the Stephenville airport. All communication with Stephenville has been cut off. I can't reach anyone. There is a population of 10,000 people, but I can't, even when I call the church, it's an answering machine. You can't get there because there's only one road from Port Basque, where the ferry lands, because you only can get to Newfoundland by ferry. There's only one road going into Stephenville. And guess what? The atmospheric river that we had there, a few months ago, wiped out that highway. At the same time, someone that you may know that appears with David Zubek, John Drake, he monitored flights for me on this program where you could see what flights and the tail numbers. And MonkeyWorks is looking now too, but we got 3 flights from the UAE landing at Stephenville Airport every week. What the hell? So in Sydney, where I'm sitting, we have what is called a radar dome. And it's been here since 1953. And underneath that radar dome, which is supposed to be decommissioned, but it's not. Underneath that radar dome, we have all of the underground cables coming in from Europe, from fiber that's come in from Europe. All the cables come into Cape Breton, they leave Point Michel, and they go directly to the eastern seaboard of the US. Now, we're sitting on top of all that activity. There's 7 levels below this radar base that they actually added to, because part of my story in another time will be about the nonprofit that took over the base to put a facade of housing there, but the military still go there in plain clothes. And they go into this structure, and the deep underground tunnels are hooked up 45 miles away to the Bell Estate, which is up into that, and again down to Point Michel. And all of this activity is going here in Cape Breton. Okay. And the whole world is looking everywhere else while the Chinese are setting up right over on your back doorstep. They practiced how to take out medical systems. They did that in Newfoundland about 2 months ago. They ran a simulation. So they're going to use that as part of taking out the rest of Canada probably next. But right here in communist Canada, and we are communist now, the Stephenville, Newfoundland Airport is the base and it's the jumping off point. And here we're so docile that now that the population here is not aware, not even the slightest. They think that dome up there is decommissioned, and nobody asks questions. So the globalists have determined that Cape Breton is a part of their protected environment. We have not had one COVID death here. 2 years. But yet we have a hospital that is, for 7 years in a row, the highest death rate in all categories for the whole country of Canada, socialized medicine. And in that socialized medicine network, there's a group of people that the globalists have put here that are running riot, and they're decimating the healthcare, especially killing the old people here. We have an average of 10 people a day since January at a population base of 45,000. It's a lot of people. And I complain about it, and they stick all the hobs of hell have come after Glenn Muse again. They tried to evict me from the house I built here to treat people with mental illness. I've been here treating people for 15 years. I've been doing it on my own nickel. I don't get it paid from anybody. God provides for me, and I provide for people he sends. This house was a crack house. I raised 200 grand I refurbished it. I took a pledge to Our Lady of Fatima, and I started providing succor and help. And then they tried to kill me 3 times. The last time, I had taken a massive heart attack. I believe it was a directed energy attack. They flew me by life flight 500 clicks away, performed emergency surgery, flew me back here. They anticipated that I would die, but I came back and I actually jumped out of the ambulance. I jumped out of the ambulance. Now you think about that. Now, I went in the hospital, signed my release papers, and I came home. And I got on my bed and I said, I'm going to recuperate, because the adrenaline I needed to do that act really took its toll. And so I needed to lay down and rest. So I'm here in the house, and people that are the property managers are trying to get me out. So the construction crew shows up the next morning, and for 3 weeks, they hammered, nailed, and sawed above me, sending me back into the hospital. I'm fortunate that I have a doctor who's also a psychiatrist, and he's a good friend. And you know how rare that is. I don't know if people understand that, but if I didn't have this man in my life right now, I'd be dead. That's how serious this is. We had one doctor who gave me a prescription, and I have all the evidence. Everything I tell you is documented. I have FOIA requests. I have everything. I learned this from Jim Fetzer years ago. I'll be able to keep a track of things. And I've been doing it my whole life since Sandy Hook, and since then. So I have all this documentation, and they're trying to get me out of here again. But now the police are involved. This doctor made a prescription out, and I took it to the pharmacy, and they should have flagged it because they didn't. And when I came home, I took some of this. I thought it was for my throat. You have to see how raspy it is. And it turned out to be what is called Epipac syrup. And you should look it up, because if you take just a drop of this on your tongue, you immediately go into convulsions and throwing up. And if you had nothing on your stomach, you continue to convulse. I was on the floor for 2 days. Nobody came here. And when I got out of that, I went to the police. They wouldn't investigate. I got the documents. The police chief, his name is Peter McIsaac. When I launched the investigation into the hospital and produced documents of malfeasance, he had to retire because his wife works there. Now we have a new chief, Robert Walsh, woke. So I'm taking him to task, and we're going to have really some good information in the next few weeks as I play with these people, because they're all mental midgets. And I'm still here. I'm sitting here talking to you. I have an angel that is takes care of me. I have no fear. Fear is not in my vocabulary. I think I was scared one time. Yeah, it was a bear. It was a bear, and I was up working on a power line, and I stared him down. So maybe I don't have fear. I worked in a coal mine. I was buried. It took them an hour to get me. To get this. When the coal line, when the belt line broke, it was carrying tons and tons of coal to the surface. And it flooded me, and it picked me up, and it pushed me up this tunnel. And as it was pushing me, it pushed me into what they call a manhole. It's a telephone booth-sized hole where you could jump off the tracks, not get hit. So there I ended up getting saved again. So I have an angel. And I'm going to leave it at that, I guess, Jim.
Well,
For
this
now.
has been a fascinating story. I want everyone to know the lines are open for callers. The number 540-352-4452, 540-352-4452 for questions for Glenn Muse or for me, whether they're about the January 6th event and the Democrats' effort to try to preclude Trump from running again because of their anxiety he will once again clean their clock, or the more fascinating personal story Glenn's been sharing. Call us. We'll get you on the line. 540-352-4452. We await your call.
Even the government admits that 9/11 was a conspiracy. But did you know that it was an inside job? That Osama had nothing to do with it. That the Twin Towers were blown apart by a sophisticated arrangement of mini or micro nukes. That Building 7 collapsed 7 hours later because of explosives planted in the building. Barry Jennings was there. He heard them go off and felt himself stepping over dead people. The U.S. Geological Survey conducted studies of dust gathered from 35 locations in Lower Manhattan and found elements that would not have been there had this not been a nuclear event. Ironically, that means the government's own evidence contradicts the government's official position. 9/11 was brought to us compliments of the CIA, the neocons of the Department of Defense, and the Mossad. Don't let yourself be played. Read America Nuked on 9/11. Available at moonrockbooks.com. That's moonrockbooks.com.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
This is your host, Jim Fetzer, on The Raw Deal with my special guest, Glenn Muse. We have a caller from the 412 area code. Caller, please just give your first name and your state and join the conversation.
Hi, this is Mike from Pennsylvania.
Excellent.
Hey, I didn't really have a question for your guest, but I was just wondering if you knew much about Fauci and his Grady in-laws and their connections to the Bush family.